Well, when most people get married and start a family, they likely don't imagine that one day they'll be living in separate households and sharing custody of the kids. But the reality is 38% of marriages currently do end in divorce. For one Regina family, planning a successful divorce means they're able to be a stronger, healthier family in the long run. Our producer here at Blue Sky, Nicole Huck, caught up with two divorcees who have a healthy co-parenting relationship.
What I can also do is maybe bank some overtime.
Yeah, and take it then.
See if I can take.
Risa Pant and Jose Miguel Olecherias sit side by side at her kitchen table. The calendar on her laptop is open.
This August is
Yeah. No, it's August.
Risa and Jose Miguel have scheduling time with their 10 and 7-year-old daughters down to a science.
We split the week right in half, with Wednesday being the swap day, and then we alternate full weekends. So it's that's the way it works. But then we're really flexible. We have we basically set the schedule a couple of months in advance, and we sit down, Jose Miguel and myself, and oftentimes his partner as well, to kind of just figure out where are the gaps and where are there times where one of us could use extra support.
The kids might get sick, or she has to work at night, or I have a soccer game at night, and then she also help out, or we figured it out on the go. But it's a good thing that she's a planner. She already planned the next 2 Christmas.
Their lives right now are very structured, which is in stark contrast to their lives when they first met more than a decade ago working on cruise ships.
Yeah, I guess it's not like a typical story. We had sort of been on again, off again, and then I discovered that I was pregnant with our oldest daughter. Mm-hmm. And the conversation, just because I was in Canada and Jose Miguel was in Peru, and we talked a lot about just like wanting to be a family.
The couple decided the easiest way for them to be a family was to get married and live in Canada.
I don't know. It all happened so fast. And I think it's interesting for us too, because when we were on ships, our lives were really different, obviously, than when we were suddenly settled in Regina and had a baby.
I feel like we were forced to grow up right away.
Yeah.
Because we were having fun, we were just traveling, we had no responsibilities, no bills to pay whatsoever, nothing. And then we were here, and then, boom, you had to be a dad, you had to be a mom, you had to work, boom.
The couple found they weren't as compatible when faced with the reality of life in Regina as new parents. And while their marriage was difficult, they found parenting together was quite easy and natural. And they wanted their daughter to have a sibling.
It seems funny because we got divorced while I was pregnant, but I still think that was the right decision for us to have another baby because we really loved being parents. Like, I think the biggest thing that set us up to have kind of a successful divorce is that we started, we made the decision to separate when I was pregnant, and then made the decision together that actually what would be best for our family is if we just agreed and we shook on it that we would live together until Ever turned 2. And that's our youngest daughter. And so we moved into separate rooms. We lived separated. We told the kids and all of our family that we weren't together anymore, but we shared a home and shared responsibilities of parenting an infant. And I think that really forced us to not just run away from trying to create healthy models of conflict resolution, but to figure out, okay, how do we get past all of the hurt that existed in the end of our marriage? Because that was there, Yes. Yeah, it wasn't a perfect dissolution of a marriage, and I don't think anyone's is. But how do we, as grown-ups, get past how we felt hurt that really had nothing to do with our kids? We had to figure out how to have a healthy relationship for the sake of our family, and just worked really hard to do that.
And that work involved sharing the care of an infant, even in the middle of the night.
We would take shifts. We'd set alarms so that each of us would sleep for 2 hours, and then we'd swap out so that we could get 2-hour chunks of sleep every night. So I'd nurse her and I'd rock her for a little bit, and then he'd wake up for 2 hours and take her. And, and we also had a toddler at home.
This teamwork set the tone for their relationship. But living together in the same space was challenging. By the time 2 years came around, they were ready to have their own space. Dating was easier when you didn't share a home with your ex, and they saw benefits to living apart and sharing custody.
I don't know. I feel like lots of people say to me oh, hey, it's your life with your kids seems so fun, and it is. But that's because I'm not exhausted because I'm not with them all the time. And so, every second weekend I can sleep until noon, sit and read a book in my pajamas all day without anyone needing anything from me. And that's a real luxury. I think it's like a huge perk of divorce parenting.
That little break that we have we do enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we try to spend more like quality time. So what we do is I try to learn as much as I can, anything from them. I want to get involved more about schooling, about their feelings, about what they like, what they don't like, even with food or cooking. We try to play games and stories.
Over the years, the two have refined some practical rules and strategies for co-parenting.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is communication. And that's the thing I think too, like when people are especially recently divorced and you've got all these big feelings that you're still sorting through, they don't want to talk to each other. And you just can't do that when you have kids. Like you just have to deal with your own stuff in whatever way you need to deal with it and make sure that you're in constant communication. So Jose Miguel and I text a lot during the day about really practical stuff. Yeah, or like if the kids come home and there's been some conflict or school, then it immediately is like, hey, let's call your dad so that we can all be on the same page. Let's talk about this together. Because that's a big thing for us. I think there was a little while there where the kids, when they were starting to get older, were starting to play us off each other a little bit. And that's so much easier to do. I think it happens in every home, but it's easy to do when you're not in the same place all the time. So, they'd tell me things their dad had said and eventually just putting that on the table with Jose Miguel, realizing that they were doing that to both of us and that wasn't real. So we sort of sat down as a family and said, listen, like, before anything else, like your dad and I are on the same team. Us not being in the same home doesn't mean that suddenly like you have these two disparate families, right? Like we are one family.
And whether it's taking the kids while the other person is sick or away for work, when life gets tough, they have each other's backs.
There's things too, like I remember the kids had lice this fall and it was the first time that we dealt with it. And I found it here at my house. And anyone whose kids have had lice, like it's just such a nightmare, right? And Jose Miguel came over and we stayed up all night, like doing laundry and he like picked nits out of my hair and stuff. And yeah.
Yeah, we help each other a lot.
Yeah.
Jose Miguel has been dating the same woman for the past 5 years and they're now engaged. Risa admits it's been challenging from time to time navigating this new role in their family.
We had a hard time nailing down a Christmas schedule. We'd done Christmases together for years and years. And then Jose Miguel and his partner, it felt important to them that they started to develop their own traditions. And I understood that, but I was quite emotional about it. It was a really hard conversation. And so really just getting to the point where we were sitting down and I was saying like, here's why this makes me sad. And he's saying, here's why this is important to me. And then you figure it out. And you learn to make compromises because everything is coming from a place of like respect for the other person and their rights to be a parent.
The family is truly able to enjoy the time they do spend together.
What if there's a yes card?
But they recognize it's easy to enjoy each other's company when you aren't around each other all the time.
Sometimes the kids feel sad, for sure, that we don't live in the same house, and Ever especially sometimes wants us all to be in the same place, and we make time for that, certainly. But I think it's good for them to understand, too, that the choice that we made not to be together is also a choice about respecting ourselves and what was right for us, and that, they don't have to be in something that's not right for them, and they can make choices that are the right choices for them and still hold the emotions of other people. You know what I mean? Like, that it's okay if things fall apart and you can rebuild and you can grow from that experience. And I think that that's something that's good to learn.
And it's all part of the beautiful mess that is co-parenting after divorce.
She hates the hairy potatoes.
I'm going to win, right?
For CBC Radio, I'm Nicole Huck in Regina.
Well, big thank yous to Jose Miguel and Risa for sharing their co-parenting after divorce wisdom and experience. And while they might make it sound easy, we know that many families struggle with having a healthy co-parenting relationship during and after a divorce. So we want to hear from you today. Have you figured out some strategies for co-parenting that worked with your ex? Do you know families who have figured out a way to minimize the negative impact of divorce on their children? give us a call. It's 1-800-716-2221. You could email us. It's bluesky@cbc.ca or reach us on Twitter @blueskycbc. Again, that telephone number, 1-800-716-2221. Now, according to our guest today, successful co-parenting could be one of the greatest gifts you give your children. Karen Christensen has firsthand experience at this and is author of Co-Parenting from the Inside Out, Voices of Mom and Dads. And she's on the line now. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Garth.
Karen, first off, what were you thinking when you were listening to that story of the Regina couple co-parenting their two daughters?
Oh, I loved it. I really appreciated how honest they were and how successful they were in keeping their kids forefront in their decision making. And the other thing I loved was they were really talking about family in an expanded definition. And I think that's certainly for me, and I think for lots of people, you think, oh, we're getting divorced, we failed at this family thing. And that's not necessarily the case. Family can be many different shapes.
Karen, how common is this sort of relationship now?
I looked for statistics and how it's been very successful in finding hard numbers, but my sense is co-parenting is becoming more and more the norm for people. It's still tricky when there's a lot of conflict, and of course, if there are families where there is evidence of abuse or neglect, then it's not a good idea. So it's not always a good idea anyway.
Right. Okay, folks, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the concept of co-parenting or joint custody, I suppose, is a form of co-parenting. And, certainly after a divorce, it would be very difficult, I think, for some couples to come together for the sake of the kids and co-parent. But we just heard from a couple that's making it work, and we'd like to hear from you today as well. Are you in a co-parenting relationship? How's it working out for you? How have you made it work? Even shared custody, we'd like to hear from you today. How have you made that work? Or maybe you think the whole thing sounds like it's, 1 in a million that could make it happen. Either way, we'd like to hear from you and hear your experiences today on Blue Sky. Our phone number, as usual, 1-800-716-2221. You could email us. It's bluesky@cbc.ca or reach us on Twitter, where we're at BlueSkyCBC. Again, our telephone number, 1-800-716-2221. Our guest today, Karen Christensen, is author of Co-Parenting from the Inside Out, Voices of Mom and Dads. And Karen is with us throughout the rest of our time together today. Karen, I'm sure there are a lot of people listening now who are thinking, okay, this one couple we just heard from seemed to be making it work, but there is no way that I could possibly work like that with my ex-spouse.
I think you're right. Because while I think the long-term effects of co-parenting can be so good all around, the early stages are really tricky. I mean, you're often looking at needing to work closely with the person in the world that you least want to be talking with or having anything to do with. So it takes a lot of, I think, commitment to saying, yes, we are going to find a way to make this work. And I liked the mom talked about her having to deal with those feelings. It wasn't a perfect divorce. And, yeah, it's the feelings that tend to be the hardest thing. And in the stories of the people that I interviewed, the people who actually took their feelings and dealt with them, as opposed to sort of charging through and saying, okay, I don't feel good, but we'll just make this work. The people who dealt with their feelings were way more successful, because then at some point the feelings kind of softened. They didn't go away necessarily, but they softened and eased, and that made it easier to establish kind of a business-like working relationship with the other parent.
I don't want to come off as too cynical here, but, the stories we hear far more often are, on one hand, support payments that are never made. On the other hand, visits that are never had with children. And I'm just something tells me that the folks we just heard from would be extraordinarily uncommon. But your experience would seem to be different. I mean, you've written a book about it.
Well, so my own experience was also positive. I mean, my sons are grown now, and they have a strong relationship with both their dad and me, which is really what the main thing was, and they're, working reasonable people. But the range of experiences that people have is so wide. My experience is that there are lots of people who are have experienced really vicious conflict in the course of their divorce, and there are lots of people who are saying, some of them, in fact, have said, well, I know my husband was married before, and I saw what happened in his divorce. I don't want to do that to our kids. And so they really put a lot of effort into making it work. So I think there's both.
One of the complaints you hear from a lot of divorced parents is, and even in a shared custody situation, is that, when they're with mom, they hear a lot of complaints about dad. When they're with dad, they hear a lot of complaints about mom. There seems to be, it seems that there's almost an innate need almost to denigrate the other partner to try to win over the kids. How do you get past that in a co-parenting situation?
Well, in my own situation, it was my ex who first said, and of course we won't badmouth each other with the kids. And I thought, because at that point I had a number of bad things I wanted to say. But I thought, okay, he's got a point. And as soon as I started to consider it from our son's point of view, I got it, that it would put them in a horribly uncomfortable situation. Are they going to agree and be disloyal to the other parent? Are they going to disagree and get into a fight with their mom? And that's, I think, the case with most of the parents that I interviewed. Once it was even suggested to them, okay, this is going to be a bad thing for your children, then they would kind of take that venting, and most people need to do some, I think, someplace safe and that was out of the hearing of the kids. Not all, but I think that was, it's kind of a reasonable thing once you think about it.
Okay, Karen, we're going to take a real quick break for a news update with Tori Gillis, and then we'll be back to our conversation. Folks, if you're just joining us, our conversation today is about co-parenting. More and more couples are finding a way to be good parents together while living their lives apart after a divorce. We'd like to hear from you today. Perhaps you're in a co-parenting or shared custody arrangement that is working out. We'd like to hear how you do it. Maybe you're in a situation where you don't think it would work. We'd like to hear why not. Give us a call with your thoughts on co-parenting after divorce. It's 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Tori Gillis now with a quick news update for us. Hey, Tori.
Hey there, Garth. Well, we're tracking a tragic story out of Prince Albert. Police there are investigating the death of a 10-month-old girl apparently hit by a truck moving at a very low speed at the Arthauser Sports Centre parking lot. We'll have the very latest on that. As well, gas prices have jumped by about 4 cents a litre in New Brunswick as Ottawa imposed a carbon tax on that province, including Saskatchewan as well, on all the provinces that don't have their own emissions pricing. And Conservative leader Andrew Scheer was in New Brunswick for that, speaking out against the federal plan. We'll hear from him coming up in your news.
Thanks very much, Tori.
Thanks, Garth.
Tori's going to be back at 1 o'clock with a complete CBC newscast. Back to our conversation today about co-parenting after divorce. We got a couple of experts lined up to talk about it. We heard from a couple in Regina earlier in the program who have made it work. And I'd like to hear from you today. How have you made co-parenting work after divorce? Or did you find it just too difficult? Or did you make it work? Give us a call. It's 1-800-716-2221. Email bluesky@cbc.ca or reach us on Twitter, where we are at BlueSkyCBC. Karen, before I bring our next guest in, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was quite often in a divorce, each parent wants to be the fun parent, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'll go out on a limb here and say especially divorced dads want to be seen as the fun guy, and mom can be the heavy. How do you split up discipline in a co-parenting relationship?
That's a great question. Well, to me, part of real co-parenting is having the kids enough of the time that you have them some of the weekend time, you have some of the weekday time, so that both parents are in a position where they have to say, sort of, have you got your homework ready? Is your backpack got everything you need? As well as planning some fun stuff for the weekends. So that's one way of kind of ensuring that there's some sort of consistency, that both parents take the workaday role as well as the fun role. But your question about how do you ensure they share discipline, I don't know that that's any easier with co-parenting than it is with other parenting, with intact family parenting. You hopefully talk about the basics that you want your kids to be doing, and say something or do something if that doesn't happen. But there's no way to ensure that both parents do that, as far as I can see.
Okay, I want to bring John into the conversation, passing through the province today. Hi, John.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you folks?
I'm okay, John. Go ahead. Tell us your story.
Basically, I'm a father of three, and my ex and I, the first few years, it was pretty darn difficult, and we found that common space, even while we were living provinces apart. And as much as I applaud parents that can do what that couple early in the show did, the reality of it is what happens the majority of the time is the children are used as pawns. And I have friends in my life that they've been divorced, and it is nothing but horrendous to watch, because the kids not only become, as you said, that sounding booth, the parent talks about the other parent, but these kids become what I call bounty. They're used to continue the parents' adolescent actions of arguing, and I find that there's the big thing, is that the kids have to deal with that, and children at that small age, they don't know how to deal with that, let alone the parents. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be done for the parents, and to be honest, they need to act as adults. People are getting divorced nowadays. You said 38%. Nobody tries, my parents were together 55 years. Nobody puts effort into marriages, and nobody really thinks about children. Half of the time it's a mistake, or it was unplanned. So they're already behind the eight ball when the children are born. So I think people need to start using reality, and when you're going to have children, you need to make that plan instead of just, oh well, we're pregnant, let's move on with it, because it's not a good ending, and 38% says that.
John, thanks so much for joining the conversation. Careful on the road.
Thank you.
Any thoughts, Karen?
Yes, well, I couldn't agree more that it does happen that some parents will kind of continue the conflict through their children, which is, as John said, horribly destructive and not at all fair to the kids. In fact, in the research I did, there were the self-management skills of the parents were the biggest factor in how successful they were able to be at co-parenting. And emotional awareness was the top thing. Having an ability to stop and say, okay, what impact is my action going to have on the people around me, and how am I feeling right now? Because without that awareness, you can inflict damage on kids. Now, one factor that can help that is if parents have really a lot of conflict, then rather than co-parenting, there's something called parallel parenting, where they both have the care of the children for a fair amount of time, but the contact between the parents is very constrained to, say, emails or a very, very thoroughly worked out parenting plan. So that's a possibility that still keeps the contact with the children without having that destructive conflict leak in.
Karen, why did you decide to co-parent?
I guess there were a couple of reasons, Garth. One is I knew that the boys' dad, John, was important to the boys. I also knew I couldn't stay in the marriage anymore. So, okay, if I'm not going to be part of the marriage, what happens here? And I also thought I would be a really terrible full-time single parent. I thought nobody would want to live with me if I didn't have some breaks and some time to myself. So if I put those two things together, then co-parenting seemed to be the least awful alternative. And so I asked John if we were to separate, if he would consider co-parenting. And he said, okay. So that's what it took.
Okay, folks, if you're just tuning in today on Blue Sky, we're talking about co-parenting, shared custody, but more the concept of true co-parenting after divorce. We began the show hearing from one couple in Regina who have made it work. Our guest, Karen Christensen, has written a book called Co-Parenting from the Inside Out, Voices of Moms and Dads. She's on the line with us. And joining us now is Anne Genone. She's an international best-selling author of Co-Parenting in Harmony series of books, also a life coach who specializes in co-parenting, working with divorced parents who are going through big life transitions, and she's on the line now. Anna, thanks for your time.
Hi, thank you. By the way, I just want to make a little correction. It's Anna Genone.
Genone.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Sometimes I'm better off if people don't write pronouncers for me. I understand, though, that you have a lot of your own personal experience that's informed your books. Could you tell us a little bit about your situation?
Yes, well, first I'd like to start off by saying thank you for having me. But secondly, I'd like to say that I'm a child of divorce. I lived it as a child. I know what it's all about. And I know that children are suffering from it as I suffered myself. And then I got involved with a man who had a child and started co-parenting. So now it's been 33 years today. I'm no longer co-parent. However, we are grandparents now who are passing on love and harmony. So I know the whole deal about what co-parenting is all about, and the primary goal about every one of us co-parenting, it was always about the child. We need to focus about the child's mental health. It's very important because they are suffering in this. They don't like to see mom and dad in separate homes, and especially they don't like to see mom and dad bad-mouthing each other and yelling at each other all the time because it's really destructive and very damaging to the kids.
Now, Anna, as you mentioned, you're into the grandparent phase of life now, so obviously you and your ex decided on this course of action pretty early on, certainly long before I think they even had a name for it. How difficult was that for you in those early days?
Difficult. It wasn't really difficult as more of adjusting to a new phase, adjusting to the family transition and how, everybody should be on the same page. It's more about that because everybody within the mix wanted the best for this child's best interest, for this child's well-being. It was very important for all parents. By the way, we're 4 parents. We're bio parents and bonus parents. I am a bonus parent. I say bonus parent instead of a step parent. So, and all of us wanted the well-being of this child. So the focus was always on the well-being of the child. Maybe there were some disagreements. Yeah, they were. But however, they never came up in front of the child. It was always dealt among each other, and that was it. The focus was always about the child.
I want to put this question to both of you. I'll start with you, Karen. What was the most rewarding part of co-parenting for you so far?
I think as our boys became adults, seeing, I guess, first of all, seeing them become good men, that was for sure the biggest one. And the other piece was watching them deal with their dad and with me, and know that it's a genuine, solid relationship. They know both of us well. They know what our gifts are. They know what our flaws are, and they love both of us.
How about you, Anna? What was the most rewarding part of co-parenting?
I agree with Karen. Today, my son is very successful. My bonus son is very successful. He's thriving in his business. He's thriving in his family. He's an amazing dad, and he's also is a bonus dad as well. And he loves his parents, and there's no shame for him to love his poor parents. He doesn't feel any shame, or he's free in front of all of us, loving us, hugging us, kissing us, telling us that he loves us. So, it's loving freely, and I think it's the amazing gift that we can give our children, that they can love their parents freely without being held back.
Mm-hmm.
Nicely said.
Thank you.
Okay, listeners, we do want to hear from you today. Have you figured out some strategies for co-parenting that worked with you and your ex? Do you know families who've figured out a way to minimize the negative impact of a divorce on their children? If you feel like your family is healthier than ever following a divorce, we'd sure love to hear from you. Our telephone number is 1-800-716-2221. Email bluesky@cbc.ca. or reach us on Twitter, where we are at BlueSkyCBC. Another question for both of you. I'll start this time with Anna. How do you navigate Christmas or other, special holidays where everybody wants to be together?
Well, we do Christmas together. It was a request by our son, by my bonus son. At one point, he, in his early I would say late teens, he came up to us and said, listen, I really want to do Christmas with all four of my parents together. Do you think we can do that? Because, I'm fed up of going from one house, another house. And so we said, yeah, we can do that for you, and we will do it. So we got all together, all four parents together, and we invited them, and plus the extended family and the blended family. And now we do Christmas together. We do Mother's Day, Father's Day. We even went on a beach vacation and a cruise together. So we are really co-parenting in harmony. I walk the talk. I really walk the talk.
There are people listening right now, Anna, who are saying, wow, I could not stand to even be in the same room as my ex's new partner.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That just seems to add an extra level of complexity to it, and I'm curious how you handle that.
Well, you know what? It's not about us. It's about the kids. It's about the kids' desire. It's about the kids' wishes. And, they're young and they're going through so many struggles themselves. So we have to be adult enough, mature enough, and knowing that we're not each other's enemies. Whatever happened between adults, it didn't work as spouse partners. But hey, you're still parenting partners. You're still parents to this child. Mm-hmm. So let's tie ourselves. Let's shake hands and think about our parenting roles, and let's be together as parents.
Yeah. Karen, I wonder if you could address that, because, again, I can see a lot of situations where, maybe the second last person on earth you want to be with is the ex, but the very last person you want to be with is the ex's new partner.
Well, I agree. It's not an easy one. And, for instance, for all the way along, John and I would get together with the boys for Christmas morning, and when we had new partners, then they would be part of that mix if they were available. But the sort of the wholehearted acceptance to me has been quite a slow thing, and it finally really ripened for me when my one of my sons was getting married, and I thought, what is the best gift I could give this man? It would be a completely free and no undercurrents of any kind wedding. And so I thought, okay, it's time. And so for me, it was the sort of the letting go was perhaps slower than I wish it were. Mm-hmm. But I finally thought, yeah, it's time. let's just embrace this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, folks, once again, we are talking about co-parenting today, and we're curious. We'd like to hear from you if you have figured out some strategies for co-parenting that worked for you and your ex. Do you know families who have figured out a way to minimize the negative impact of divorce on the kids? Maybe you feel like your family is better off now than it was before the divorce. Or another group we'd like to hear from today is people whose parents divorced. And what was that experience like for you? It could have been recently. It could have been a long time ago. But I'm sure it's something that has still had an impact on you. Obviously better if they could get along and co-parent, but certainly that's not always the case. So we would like to hear from people whose parents divorced. And if you can talk about that experience, we'd sure like to hear from you. Our telephone number, again, is 1-800-716-2221. Email bluesky@cbc.ca or reach us on Twitter @blueskycbc. Again, that telephone number, 1-800-716-2221. Lana is on the line now in Saskatoon. Hi, Lana.
Hi, how are you this afternoon?
I'm well, thanks. Go ahead.
I just wanted to be able to offer some insights, and I help people separate and divorce outside of courtrooms for a living. And part of what I do with mediation services is assist clients with developing a co-parenting relationship. And all of the callers that have talked about the aspirational relationship for co-parents is certainly laudable. But I think that because of the trust issues that often come with separation and divorce and relationship breakdown, most families need an outside resource to help them with those relationship dynamics, with those communication protocols, and also to encourage them to do the work to deal with their grief. And that helps them then transition from that relationship as spouses to that relationship as co-parents. Mm-hmm. And I think for separation and divorce, where it's one of the most common phenomenons that happens to us other than getting married and having children itself, we need to change the dialogue and change the appetite to offer people who are going through this tremendously deep transition these kind of services for exactly what they need. Yeah. Make sure it's a transition instead of an ongoing life experience.
Lena, I'm just curious before I let you go, though. Would you agree, though, that the people who come to you for a mediated separation rather than, the full-blown adversarial court type divorce are probably already more likely to be amenable to this sort of arrangement?
I think historically I would have answered yes. I think now we have more of a dialogue and more of an understanding in the general community about alternative measures to separation and divorce outside of courtrooms. So what I would say to you is that they all share a common appetite to preserve their children in as best as possible way. And what I liked what your last caller said, I talk the talk and I walk the walk. I think that every parent actually wants to talk the talk, and I actually do think that they have a genuine desire to walk the walk, but they need someone to hold their hand, and they need someone to help them create that blueprint. And so I do believe that I'm getting more clients who recognize that they want something outside of the traditional knee-jerk reaction of hiring a lawyer and exploding their lives in court, but they also recognize that they need some help to do it. And I really do find that people are willing to help, are willing to follow the advice and listen to somebody who is outside of the relationship. It's incredibly difficult to be a leader or to make decisions in that co-parenting relationship with the other person's buy-in. And I think incorporating a third party into that with some expertise and assistance to be able to develop those relationships for people absolutely helps people, not just the ones who are already of that mind, but also of the ones who want to be of that mind.
Right.
I agree.
Lana, thank you so much. Thanks so much for your input today.
Thank you.
Any thoughts?
The co-parents that I interviewed, a lot of them had regrets, but nobody regretted getting help in sorting through their own feelings or how to put together a parenting plan, any of that stuff. So I absolutely agree with that caller.
Yeah. May I speak?
Yes, go ahead, Anna.
I recently had a divorced couple that I helped coach. They were in courts for 7 years, in and out of court. They couldn't get on the same page. So I developed a 6-week program for them, and I helped them. I accompanied them, and today they are speaking with each other. They are collaborating, and the woman, the mom says, you know what you did for us in 6 weeks was never done within court or with any other coaches. So it's really about teaching them that, they want to walk walk the talk. They also want to talk the talk, but also they gotta do the work. They gotta do the work, and they needed somebody to help them, accompany them on their path to do the work. Okay. And so, yes, they do need coaching. They do need to become more skillful how to become a co-parent. It's not easy when there's a lot of emotions involved, but they do need a third party involved to help them on their path, on their co-parenting path.
Okay, I want to bring Cody into the conversation now on the line in Saskatoon. Hi, Cody.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead, sir.
So, yeah, my parents were divorced when I was 5, which is back in the early 90s. And they made it pretty comfortable for me because there was no legal battles or anything. My dad just accepted it, and he could pay whenever he wanted to pay. There was no fighting about it. But he had to move to Ontario because his mom was sick. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like co-parenting. I would go there at least once a month every year, and they were really good with it. And it was a really equitable divorce, where they didn't have any fights, and I felt that it was comfortable between both of us, even though I spent more time with my mom.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Cody, how is your relationship with your dad now that you're an adult?
It's not nearly as good as it is with my mom, just because, I only got to spend maybe a month, 2 months of the year with him. But it's still really good. I call him every month. We still have a really good relationship. And, it was probably the best situation that could have been because they weren't good together. They needed to get a divorce, but they also wanted to keep me, comfortable. I was only 5, so... Yeah.
Does it change the way you think about marriage or how you would or are or will parent?
Yeah, it does a little bit because, I'm in a relationship right now with a kid and another one on the way. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes we have our fights and stuff, but I'm always willing to, push through so we could spend some time together. I can understand having the living together and not being in an actual relationship, though, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. All right.
Like co-parenting. Sorry. Right. Anyways.
Fair enough. Cody, thanks for sharing your experience and telling us your story. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks. Have a good day.
All right. Just a few minutes left here, and I want to get each of you to share your thoughts on this. What advice, Karen, would you have for families thinking right now about separating, but they're afraid of what it might mean for their access to the kids or what it might mean for the kids?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of examples out there now of how it can be done, and it's worth doing, I think would be one of the pieces of advice. Another one would be avoid drama if you can, if you're separating, because whatever energy goes into the drama of wild fighting, intense conflict with your spouse, that energy will not be present for your kids. And the third piece of advice would be keep checking with the kids. How are they doing? What do they need? And make sure that stays in the center.
How about you, Anna? What advice would you have for families thinking about separating but are afraid of what it means to the kids?
Well, I totally agree with Karen about avoiding drama. I mean, avoid drama. What goes on between the adults stays between the adults. It's to stay present, be mindful, you are partners, you are parents, teamwork. It's all about teamwork. It's all about communication. Be honest with each other. Relating to your child only. You don't have to know about, what's going on in the past or whatever. But being honest with each other regarding your child, focusing on your child, keeping agreements, and stay involved in your child's life. Just because you're divorcing doesn't mean that it's the end of the family, doesn't mean that it's the end of your parenthood. You both are still parents. You're just no more spouse partners. That's it. Okay. But you're still parents. So stay involved.
One more question for each of you. I'll start with you this time, Anna. What is the biggest single mistake co-parenting couples make at the beginning?
I would say honestly, it's the bad mouthing, the emotional hurt that they pass on to their kids. So they need to know how to separate that. Like I said earlier, you're not each other's enemies. You're still parents. It didn't work. You're not compatible as lovers or as spouses, but you can be compatible as parents.
How about you, Karen? What would you say is the biggest mistake or two that people make at the beginning of a co-parenting?
One, I think, would be not accepting the reality of where they are and sort of clinging to what they want to have happened. Mm-hmm. And the second one is not doing the work that with their feelings that will allow them to be good co-parents, both with their children and with the other person.
All right, Karen, Anna, I want to thank you both for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. I think it's been helpful.
My
pleasure.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. I hope we made a difference in someone's life today.
Well, that's what we hope.
Goal.
That's our goal. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Anna Gannon is an international best-selling author of the Co-Parenting and Harmony series of books, and Karen Christensen is author of Co-Parenting from the Inside Out, Voices of Moms and Dads. And as usual, if you have something you would like to share with us about co-parenting, joint custody, or maybe you are the child of a divorce where your parents did co-parent, and how did that work out for you? We'd love to hear from you. Our telephone number for TalkBack is 1-800-661-7540. Our email address, bluesky@cbc.ca. Tomorrow on the program, Saskatchewan, as of today, has the lowest minimum wage in all of Canada. Coming up on Blue Sky tomorrow, we're going to talk about what this means for businesses and workers in Saskatchewan. We want to hear from you, too. What do you think of the fact that Saskatchewan now has the lowest minimum wage in the country? What can be done about it, and what is the impact of raising the minimum wage? That's our conversation tomorrow, and I hope you'll be able to join us then.